Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about 5th edition, and we're specifically going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition being the most powerful world distribution system ever created by humankind. Let's jump into it. All right, I've been thinking about this a lot, and, of course, I am convinced that the vast majority of dungeon masters, the vast majority of players, and I would even say a significant number of people who work directly on the Dungeons & Dragons line don't actually understand what Dungeons & Dragons is at the fundamental level, right? So I've been watching the 1983 cartoon, and it is incredibly blowing my mind just how powerful the cartoon is and how meaningful it is. And one of the things that the 1983 Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, that Gary Gygax sacrificed a great deal to make, what it deals with is what world do you live in, right? And what are the choices you make to live in the world you live in, right? So what does this mean? So, Hank, the ranger, and Eric, the cavalier, and Diana, the acrobat, and Sheila, the thief, and Bobby, the barbarian, and Presto, the magician, and Uni, well, actually, not Uni, everybody else I just said, they are brought from IRL Earth to D&D Faerun, okay? And, or some conglomerate of the Dungeons & Dragons world. They're brought into the Dungeons & Dragons world, right? And once they're there, they have multiple opportunities to return to the real world, but they often choose not to remain in the D&D world, right? Now, why would these characters in the cartoon world choose, when they have the opportunity multiple times, to return to the IRL Earth, and they don't, right? And it brings up this question of what world do you live in, right? And every dungeon master, every Dungeons & Dragons player has this choice, right? They can say, okay, I can live in the IRL world this Wednesday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Or I can go to I can accept my invitation and go to my Dungeons & Dragons game, and I can live in Faerun. During those 2 hours, I can live in Faerun. And I don't think the world is not understanding how incredibly important this is. Because the moment you go to Faerun, you are a hero, right? And the odds are that you will remain a hero every moment of that game, and that the actions you take will have impacts that save the lives of hundreds or thousands of people, that you will gain treasure, that you will have political power, that you'll have respect, that you'll be given, divine power, like all these incredible things, right? And this world then becomes so important and so valuable, right? Now, why does that mean that this is what Dungeons & Dragons creates, right? Why does that mean that this is the most powerful, most valuable, most versatile, most adaptable, most important world distribution system ever created by humanity? Let me make my argument for it, okay? What is it? So what are world distribution systems that humans have made? The first one was the story, right? Shamans came forward and they said, hey, gather around, people. I'm going to tell you a story. And that shaman told the story, right? And for that brief period of time while they were telling that story, using the motion of their body, using the resonance of their voice, using silence, and using, even the wind, the time, speaking with the wind at particular times, all these different things, they transported those people to another world, right? Now, what came after that? The next thing that allowed people to be transported to many, many, many worlds, right, was specifically books. When the Gutenberg press was created in the 1500s, it allowed millions of people to be transported to millions of worlds, right? Like, people could say, hey, my wife right now, she lives in Regency in the Regency period, right? She reads Jane Austen's books over and over and over again. She reads books about the Regency period. She reads books set in the Regency period. She loves that world, and she can choose to go live in it whenever she wants, right? For some portion of her day, right? And so the book comes out, right? And it is a world distribution system. An author is creating a world, and then the publishing houses are assisting those authors. The readers are receiving the book. That's a world distribution system. It is a world being distributed to people, right? Next came movies, and movies were transformative. You could see and hear these other worlds, and quite literally Star Wars and Harry Potter and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Extended Universe. They gave us worlds to live in, and people lived in them for hundreds of hours every year, right? And so, this was a world distribution system, right? And then video games came, and they're, again, even more transformative. The same thing that movies did, but interaction. You control the character. You make the choices, right? Now, why does the tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which has gone through 5 decades of iteration, right? Why does it surpass Shamanic Tales? Why does it surpass books? Why does it surpass movies? Why does it surpass video games? And why has it taken its place? Why is it taking its place as the most powerful, the most important, the most valuable world distribution system ever created by human beings? Here's why. Everything that has come before has been for the masses. It is not crafted to the experiencer in a way that can be truly transformative and allows the person who's experiencing the story to very directly give feedback and interaction at a level never met by any world distribution system ever, right? I'll tell you why, okay? And in addition to that, there are limiters on, so one, that's one aspect of it, okay? Is when you write a book, you as the author don't have any control over who's going to pick that book up, okay? And so you craft a story, and that story is going to be amazing for 10% of your readers, but it's going to be traumatic for 1% of your readers, right? It will not serve everyone. You are not going to be able to take into account the safety, the emotional needs, the intellectual needs, the need for humor, right? You're not going to be able to take into account the person's feelings and emotions and mode and mood in the very moment the story is presented, okay? That cannot be done by, all right, by books, by movies, or by video games. They are limited, and frankly, they are just shriveled versions of what a dungeon master can do, okay? Shamanic Tales do rival D&D slightly, right? But the Shamanic Tales really weren't, didn't have, they lack a few things, right? So one, the things that Shamanic Tales lacked that Dungeons & Dragons does bring is the ability for there to be guardrails on the story filter to be set, and for the person who is telling the tale to tell the same story over a agreed upon length of time, right? So basically, the people who were coming to Shamanic Tales, right? Also, there wasn't, Dungeons & Dragons has an agreement, a social agreement, right? Dungeons & Dragons 5th agreement. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition says, I'm going to Dungeon Master, you're going to play, all right? You invite them in, you're going to do 3, 5, 7 sessions, or you might do 3, 5, 7 months, right? And over those periods of time, you're going to craft, the Dungeon Master will craft a story for the 4 to 5 players who are there, and that story will be just for them, crafted for them over an amount of time, and it will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Shamans didn't have that ability, right? Sally might have had to go get the water right then, right? There could be, and there could be a whole, since it was going out to the whole tribe, you couldn't expect everyone in the tribe. There wasn't a social agreement that everybody listened to all the stories all the time, and people were able to come and go, right? And also because you were doing it for the tribe, it might be 5 people sitting around the fire, it might be 15. But with Dungeons and Dragons, there is a social contract that did not exist with the shamanic tales. They didn't say, hey, I'm starting a story arc now, right? And it's going to go to 3 to 7, 3, 5, 7 months, and there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and end, and everybody here is going to get to interact and change the story. Shamanic tales are the greatest competitor to Dungeons & Dragons, but I think Dungeons & Dragons has clearly surpassed it. Here's another one that's really, really key for Dungeons & Dragons. That is the dice. So the shamanic tales, right? There were prophets. There were shamanic prophets who would roll bones and then give predictions, but generally that wasn't used to change the direction of stories that shamans told, right? Dungeon masters are godlike. They quite literally godlike. They are given a level of power that has never existed in any story-driven ability, right? In any story, in any world distribution system, no authors have the amount of power that dungeon masters have, right? It's so much more intimate. The proximity is so much closer. The story, the social contract of agreeing to enter into the game, there being a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's nothing like this in authorship, in movies, in video games. Nothing, right? There's no video game in the world that's created for 4 people alone, right? To experience over a amount of time, where the coder can change the story literally in the moment, right? But so since these dungeon masters have these godlike powers, right? Where do you end up when you have somebody who is a little bit out of control, who wants to tell their, where the dungeon master might not have the best interests of everybody at heart? Well, Gary Gygax built in the random generator, right? He built in polyhedrals into the system and saying, you are a god, but you are bound by the dice, right? The dice are there, and you will roll them, and you will respect their outcomes, right? And it was it was pulling the dungeon master back, right? And again, there's huge problems in the video game industry. There's no limiters for the video game industry. There's nothing to say to the creator, you're not 100% in control. You must take some random elements every now and then. These small objects will interrupt your flow, right? So that you are bound to earth, and remember that you are not a god, even though you have been given god-like powers, right? So because of this, right, dungeon masters are absolutely unparalleled in any other world distribution system, right? They can come onto the scene at any point in the story and adjust the story based on the desires of the players, based on the emotions of the players, based on the mood and the mode of the players, based on the current time, right? Movies don't have this ability. Books don't have this ability. Books really don't have this ability. And video games definitely do not have this ability. And frankly, shamans have kind of removed themselves as real competitors. There's absolutely shamans out there still telling stories, but there's a lot more dungeon masters than functioning shamans today. I'll tell you that right now, right? Dungeon masters have surpassed the shamanic tale tradition. By the way, I'll tell you right now, shamanic tale tradition is definitely Dungeons & Dragons' most competitive competitor, right? Its most powerful competitor, bar none, right? Because the reality is, I think right now, books, movies, and video games, their competition for dungeon mastering is laughable. They cannot adjust in real time. They cannot take into account the emotions of the reader. They cannot be adaptive, right? So world distribution systems, we have created a few. We've created shamanic. We've created shamanic tale tradition. We've created books. We've created movies. We've created video games. 1974, Gary Gygax crushed them all. It's done, right? And going forward, I think more and more groups will realize nothing humanity has ever created is as powerful to transport experiencers to different worlds and allow them to live in those worlds with more impact, more joy, more love, more wisdom, more raw reality invested than any other world distribution system ever put forward by humans. What Gary Gygax did in 1974 is unprecedented in human history. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, because it sits 5 decades out from a direct line from Gary Gygax's work, is the most powerful world distribution system humanity has ever created, bar none. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.